Ex-Adventist Chris Mindanao. My apologies if I said your name wrong. We're going to refer to you as Chris for the rest of the video. Ex-Adventist Chris has come out saying that Acts chapter 20 and verse 7 proves that the early church was keeping Sunday as their day of worship. Take a look at it here.
That really dismantles this whole thing is Acts chapter 20 verse 7. It says, and this is the early church, on the first day of the week, Sunday. This is the early church. This is Paul, the people that we should be modeling our lives after. On the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread, they were celebrating the communion, the Lord's Supper, right? Worshiping in drinking the wine representing the blood and the bread representing his body. On the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread, Paul talked with them, intending to depart on the next day, and he prolonged his speech until midnight.
That is his video that he said that he believes that he can keep Sunday because of that verse, and he believes that the early church was keeping Sunday because of that verse. So we're going to ask AI Ellen White and why she disagrees, and she's going to answer him and why she disagrees that he can keep Sunday because of Acts chapter 20 and verse 7. So we're going to ask the first question. And the first question is, according to her, why Acts 20 and verse 7 doesn't prove Sunday worship in the early church. Let's take a look at it. Ellen White, a prominent figure in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, often addressed the interpretation of biblical texts, including Acts 27, which some used to urge in favor of Sunday worship in the early church. According to her perspective, Acts 27 does not serve as evidence for Sunday worship being established as a regular practice in the early church. Context. She states, and upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached to them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. Some interpreted this as indication that the early church gathered on the first day of the week, or for worship and communion. Ellen White's interpretations. Ellen White urged that this passage does not establish Sunday as a day of worship for several reasons. Purpose of gathering. According to White, the primary purpose of gathering mentioned in Acts 20 and verse 7 was not to establish a new day of worship, but to bid farewell to Paul, who was about to leave. The breaking bread and Paul's intent sermon was part of this farewell, but not of regular worship. Interesting. Timing of the event. The meeting took place in the evening, which according to the Jewish reckoning of time would still be considered as part of the Sabbath. Saturday, first day of the week, began at sunset, on which we call Saturday evening. Therefore, the gathering could be seen as an extension of the Sabbath activities rather than a new practice on Sunday. Interesting. So the time proves that it actually was on Saturday night and not on Sunday. So this actually helps people who keep Sabbath and not people who keep Sunday. Let's keep going. Lack of regularity. White emphasis that there is no indication in the text that there was a regular occurrence. It was a unique event driven by circumstances, Paul's departure, not a pattern for weekly service. So she's saying because it happened only one time, it cannot be worship. Other biblical evidence. She pointed out that the Bible does not prove another clear instance of the early church meeting on Sunday for worship. Instead, Sabbath Saturday is consistently held as the rest and worship, both New and Old Testament. She's saying that the evidence of the proof is much more on Saturday, historical proof. Also, White considered the historical context of the early church was prominent Jewish and would have continued to observe Sabbath. The shift to Sunday worship, she urged, came much later and was influenced by factors outside of the mandate. Let's look at the conclusion. In summary, Ellen White's interpretation of Acts 27, it does not prove evidence for establishment of Sunday worship in the early church. Instead, she saw as a unique event focused on Paul's farewell, which happened to occur marking of the beginning of the first day of the week. Her view aligns with the Seventh-day Adventist Church in belief to continue the observance of the seventh day. So we see there that there was valid reasons for her to answer our brother Chris and why he's wrong that they were worshiping that day, and because they did that, that just changed the day, because there's no other occurrences. It's just that, and that's it. And I'm on the side of what she says. I'm on the side of the bulk of the evidence, and the bulk of the evidence is on the side that, is on the Sabbath side. Also, I want to talk about something interesting. If you notice in the video, Chris went from being a Seventh-day Adventist and knowing Seventh-day Adventist doctrines. He went from knowing that to now going to Protestant doctrines. If you notice, he's saying the same thing that the Protestants say. If he's keeping Sunday for a certain reason, and when you talk to the Protestants, they tell you that they keep Sunday because of Acts in chapter 20 and verse 7. So it's interesting when someone leaves Adventism that they go to Protestantism. And that's something very interesting. And that's something Ellen White talked about. And we're going to ask her that question now. And that question is going to be, what does she say about people who were Adventists and turned to Protestants? So we're going to ask this question. Let's read it. Ellen White addresses the topic of Adventists who turn to Protestantism in several of her writings, often with a tone of concern and abomination. Her perspective on this issue can be understood through several key points. Concern for apostasy. Her view, the shift from Adventism to Protestantism was a form of apostasy. She believed that the Advent message and the mission were divinely ordained, and leaving the faith was seen as turning away from God's chosen path. In her book, Testimony to the Church, she says, she frequently warned against the dangers and the apostasy, urged the members to remain faithful all the way, faithful to the Adventist doctrines. Let's look at reasons for leaving. Reasons for leaving. She identified several reasons why some Adventists turn to Protestantism: worldly influence. White often attributes the departure from Adventism to the influence of worldly desires and admonition. She believed that the individual might be swayed by the lure of social acceptance or material success, leading them from the more rigorous, sometimes more isolated path of Adventism. Lack of spiritual discernment. She suggested that the lack of deep spiritual contentment and understanding of Adventist doctrine could lead individuals to seek easier or more socially accepted forms of Christianity. This could include a failure to fully grasp the significance of the Sabbath and other distinctive Adventist doctrine. Something interesting, a lot of people that leave the church, they actually suffer from number 2 right there. They actually don't understand the Adventist doctrines. and they ended up leaving. Let's look at the consequence for leaving. White expressed that turning from Adventism to Protestantism had serious spiritual consequences. She believed that those who left the Adventist faith would miss out on the unique spiritual blessing and insight that come from following what she saw as God's true plan. She warned that those who left might be more sustainable to spiritual deception, as she would no longer have the protection and guidance. Interesting, very, very interesting. Interesting, very, very interesting. A call to return. Let's look at the call to return. Ellen White often called for those who had left Adventism to return. She emphasized the importance of repentance and a renewed commitment to the faith. Her writings, she includes many appeals from former members urging them to reconsider their decision and come back to the fold. Wow. Very, very interesting. Let's look at the conclusion. Ellen White's perspective on Adventists turning to Protestantism was one of deep concern and urgency. She saw it as a form of apostasy with significant spiritual consequences, called for those who had left the Adventist faith. Her writings reflect a strong commitment to distinct of Adventist belief and a desire to see the church remain faithful to the end. So, according to Ellen White, our brother Chris, this is the reason why we don't keep Sunday, because we don't believe that it proves that that's what Sunday was. Sunday worship started. We also believe that it actually was Saturday, and we actually believe that just because there was one verse, it doesn't prove. It actually you actually have the bulk of the verses in the book of Acts talking about Sabbath keeping. So I hope this helps you, my brother. God bless you. Hey friends, go to your YouTube and click on the shorts. After you go to my page, click on shorts, and on shorts, right here is where I'm showing you. You're gonna find where the yes or no answers are shown with proof. If you notice the video, the yes or no, I don't put show me the proof, but in the shorts, I put show me the proof. So if you come here and if you're looking at any yes or no's and you want to see the proof of that, you can come right to the shorts, my friends. God bless you all.